Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to call this meeting to order. Our first item on the agenda is a review of the preliminary agenda. So if you don't mind taking out your packets, the invocation next week belongs to Mr. Metzner. And just to review our meeting schedule for October, we have work sessions on Tuesday the 4th, the 11th, and 18th, all at 4 p.m. Our regular session is scheduled for October 25th at 7 p.m. We have appointments.
One correction
Sure.
possibly, and I'm sorry I didn't notice that before. Are we starting a little bit early on October 11th? Is that Yom Kippur?
I don't know.
No, I think we're fine.
Okay.
I
I'm
left
sorry,
my cell
okay.
phone- I left my cell phone.
Okay, well, I'll make a note here. We'll check later.
Possibly, okay.
The appointments for the Board of Traffic and Parking and Bicycle Advisory Committee. We will have a proclamation on the 100th anniversary of aviation here in Washington County. We have a public hearing for the rezoning of Burhan's Village, which is on our agenda this evening. And we go over, we have the minutes, obviously. And to review the consent agenda, we have 3 items under the Community and Economic Development Department. Street closure for the Engine 1 Anniversary Parade on Sunday, October 9th. Any questions about that item? We have the approval of a special event user agreement for the Life Center International for October 1st, which we discussed, I believe, last week. And the approval of Barbara Ingram School for the Arts Lamp Post Holiday Decoration Project. Any questions about those DCED items? Okay, Public Works has traffic control equipment. Any questions about that item? And Utilities has a wastewater manhole conversion risers and lids. Any questions on that item? Unfinished business, we have the approval of an ordinance to quitclaim Alley 1-006 adjacent to 400 Key Circle, which we've already discussed. New business, we have the introduction of an ordinance for land management code amendments. Any questions or additional feedback on that? We have the introduction of an ordinance amendments to the vacant structures code, which is also on our agenda this evening. We have the approval of a resolution and MOU regarding the Sailor House and Kiwanis Park. Any questions on that item? We have the approval of a resolution, item D, designating Donut Alley as one-way southbound. You know, so cars don't get all jammed up there.
Crumpy's.
You're getting your Crumpy's
They're
Donuts.
one of the businesses that has agreed.
There's been
Yeah.
a proposal made to all the residents. Every single resident in Crumpy's is in agreement except for one, if I'm correct.
So I was double checking.
The approval of a license agreement, item E, for Country Club Road right-of-way for a driveway. Any questions on that? I actually spoke with the. go ahead.
I do have questions on that. I guess a couple of questions is, I'm concerned about the quality of the structure that's going to be put there to see that if it's consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. That's a very nice area, and it's a very stable area. And I don't, looking at the information we've been given does not answer my questions, quite frankly.
Well, I can tell you, I actually spoke with and saw the architectural renderings from the person who's intending to build the house there. And I mean, I'm not an architect or an engineer or anything, or an esthetician at all, but it looks like it's going to be a pretty quality structure to me.
Okay.
It's being custom built. It's not a prefab home or anything
is
like
it-
that.
I can't tell from looking at the picture that we've been given, whether it's brick to fit in with the rest of the community, or whether it's just some sort of a siding that does not fit in with the rest of the community.
That I do not know.
Okay, and I think that's a fair thing.
Yeah.
And also my other question is, do any of the neighbors know about this? I mean, it will be an intrusion upon the community, and certainly the neighbors should know about it, I would think.
I don't know, these have been lots of record for a
Yeah.
long, long time.
Yeah.
Well, this is all of a sudden a surprise, though.
Sure.
At least to this councilman it is.
Some of them do. I know when I met Mr. Brubaker out there that day, some of the neighbors were there, were very aware of it. They seem to be in favor of it, but I can't say that everybody knows about it. I can't say
Right.
that at all.
Well,
But it is a lot of record.
I don't think we have to worry about the quality of the structure being put up, though. I think that's,
Just a disclaimer, Mr. Brubaker is no relation to me. It's a rare enough name, people think we're all related to them. You might have been related many generations back, but
Duly
no
noted.
relationship.
duly noted. Any other questions about this particular item?
I can ask until next week what the materials are and give you an update before you vote on it next week.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And speaking to the newspaper, if you could do an article on this, that would assure that the neighbors know it, and I would assume that they're going to be interested in this.
Assuming they read the newspaper.
If you can follow up on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Any
Okay.
other questions on item E? Item F, under new business, is the approval of an MOU, a second amendment to the MOU for school resource officers. Any questions on that particular item? Just clearing up redundant language and outdated references and operating procedures. The item G is approval of bulk road salt contract. It's about that time of year again, we gotta start thinking about winter. Any questions on that? $60 a ton, seems like a pretty good price.
Those, yeah.
Item H is approval of a contract to replace the roofs at the Public Works Operations Center and the Elizabeth Hager Center. Any questions on that item? Item I is the approval of a narcotics task force reimbursement for the fourth quarter of FY16. Any questions on that?
What was the source of funds? I didn't see a source of funds on that.
Source of funds. Sorry, Michelle, are you familiar with the source of funds on the NTF reimbursement? From the police department, I'm sorry, ask you.
And Chief and Captain Nixon are both here, but with NTF, it's multiple agreements. There's one
Through them.
agreement, of course, where we get the federal money, and then in turn, we reimburse the county.
So it's, some of it's federal.
Some of it's federal.
We budget the actual expenditure in our general fund, and we also likewise budget the incoming revenue, all within the general fund.
Okay, but does incoming revenue cover the whole expense? I've lost, so many of these things that I've lost track.
I'm not sure if it covers 100%.
Okay, I don't remember getting one like this before. Why is it all of a sudden, I don't remember getting one of these before.
And I think in the past, they were both done at the same time. There was one that was brought in January, or no, excuse me, in June of 2016 to cover part of fiscal year 16.
Yeah, I can't remember
And we
what
just
the
need
amount of that
additional
was.
amounts.
Right.
It's the overtime funding, for the detectives there and the officers.
Right. I just was wondering who was paying the overtime funding.
The federal government, the DEA pays that.
It's federal money?
Yes,
Okay, that's what I'm
that's
looking at.
reimbursement.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vern.
Sure. And it's, I'm assuming it's similar for the item J, which is the reimbursement for FY17, the complete reimbursement. Any other questions about our preliminary agenda? Very well. The next item on our agenda, and I apologize for the delay, is the Main Street Hagerstown Business Relations Work Group summary. Welcome to the table.
Thank you. As lead staff to the city's Main Street program, I'm here to update you all on a project that one of the Main Street work groups has been doing. And with me today are my guests, Paul Fry, Rob Galliotto, and Taylor Bowen. They are volunteers with the Business Relations Work Group. They did a project of business focus groups, and I feel like I'm sitting too close to the microphone. And they summarized information that came out of those business focus groups earlier this year, and are here today to present that summary to you all. So I just want to say before you all get started, I really appreciate all the hard work you've put into this, as well as into Main Street. They organized, they facilitated, and they also summarized and presented this information to the business reporters. So with that, I will hand it over.
So my name is Rob Galliotto. I'm one of the co-chairs of Business Relations Work Group. I'm just going to give you a quick background as to why we did the focus group and where we're going. So the Business Relations Work Group, our goal basically is to enhance recruitment and retention of businesses downtown in the Main Street area. To do that, we need to understand what are the concerns, what are the interests, basically what drives business recruitment and retention downtown. There had been a study done in 2013 by the Economic Development Office, and we looked at that study, and from that we decided that there was some more digging we could do. And as our first outreach to businesses, we decided to do focus groups. We tapped Paul Fry to help us with that. This was the first part, essentially, in creating a strategy, which is to figure out what are the levers that we could pull to attract businesses. So I'll turn it over to Paul. He'll talk a little bit about the focus groups, the information we learned, and also how we did the focus groups.
Great, thank you to Mayor and council members and Administrator Means. Thank you for having us here today. As I was waiting to start, I looked at the top of the agenda, and I think this ties in the work we're doing in the Main Street and Focus Group with what's on, I think your mission statement is a diverse, business-friendly, and sustainable community with clean, safe, and strong neighborhoods, providing the most efficient and highest quality services as a municipal location of choice for all customers. And I think that's a great tie with what we're trying to do in Main Street with our businesses. And so we have mutually beneficial goals here that hopefully are working together to achieve. And I also wanted to acknowledge the city staff, in particular Jill Frick and Amanda Whitmore. I think this was Amanda's first week when we started the focus groups, and she sat in, and when there was questions, she would say, I don't know, I'm new. So to her credit, she got answers, and she also was a good part of it. So thank you. It was a good breaking in of Amanda and her work. And you know, as Rob said, we wanted to get a better understanding of what was working well downtown with our businesses, what could be improved, and some insights that were provided. And I think all of you should have a copy of this summary. We had about 30 plus or minus page document that we summarized, working with 31 participants. I think there's about 27 business owners. There's 4 nonprofits. And there were a couple of things one thing's not in here. What we heard over and over is these business owners came to Hagerstown specifically to help with revitalization. They had lots of choices, and several in particular said, we came to Hagerstown because we saw the potential, we want to be part of this revitalization. And including, they brought their families with them and they want to live downtown. So we thought that was exciting. Some of the feedback, the positive feedback, they love the city center plan that we've been working on, and that was created a couple years ago, including the Catalyst projects. The incentive packages that were available helped some of them get started and with their businesses. The Wind Down Fridays, some of the events that help with foot traffic, certainly the Maryland Theater, the refurbishment of that, and the people that brings downtown, the Blues Fest, City Park, and the pop-up. So there are some good things happening that they mentioned. And so we highlighted from all this data we gathered from these 4 focus groups, some of the big concerns. And again, we're emphasizing, we're reporting this. This is what we're hearing. We're not saying it's true or not true, but this is what we're hearing, and some of which have been addressed already or started addressed from the city staff. The first one we noted was parking, and you can see what they said about reducing confusion, improving consistency, improving signage, improving ease for visitors, more loading zones for businesses. What they're suggesting is if we live around Hagerstown and are familiar with it, it's just second nature to come in and we know where the parking is. If someone's new to the community, either they move here or they're here for an event, it's not as easy to get your surroundings, especially in the evening.
So that's what you mean by confusion, just in
Yes.
general
Yes.
wayfinding?
It,
Okay.
and I have a terrible sense of direction, and I don't read signs very well, and I'm impatient. So I'm probably one of those people new to the community that would say, gosh, make it easy. So that's what they're reporting, is to make it easier. My biggest thrill was 6 months here in Hagerstown. Someone asked me directions somewhere, I could give it to them. So that was a win for me a year ago. The crime, real and perceived, a number of people thought it was mostly perceived because almost every person said, we're not afraid to walk downtown here. But we live down here, we know the surroundings, we're familiar. But for people who may not be as familiar, there might be a perception or reporting that's not safe. Others said it was a real issue. They talked about vagrancy, open air drug dealing, and loitering. And as we noted here, both affect businesses' success.
And if I could just pause there, because I think it's important for people to know, if they do see these things happening, they should call the police. It's that whole see something, say something. No one should ever expect this to be normal activity in their neighborhood, whether it's their business or their residential neighborhood.
And we reinforced that. I was in my neighborhood, we had a neighborhood meeting, and the chief was there, and to a person, they said, if you're unsure, call us. We have someone on duty 24 hours a day. It's a non-emergency number. Call us so we can check things out. So we try to emphasize that. A third factor, enhancing some negative perceptions, homelessness and lack of cleanliness. Again, first impressions count. Unpleasant smells, trash, and the concentration of social services downtown leads to perceived increase in disruptive behavior. So again, this is about perceptions. We talked about city government, and what we've listed here, number 5, is city government responsiveness. Again, we're not saying this is fact, we're saying this is what's reported. And some of the things listed were unanswered phone calls, failure and inconsistent enforcement of environmental codes, building codes, occupancy codes, things not being clear. I think the overall general sense was, almost to a person, they were not saying we don't want to follow the codes, we don't want to follow what we need to do. Just help us be in compliance. And if we could get the help, that's all we want. And minimize trips either to the permit office or inspectors out. Help us get over the obstacles and hurdles. Again, people come here to be part of the success. And so they're saying, if you could help us, it would make our life easier. Again, we're not trying to skirt any issues. And they did note that some of the, as we said earlier, some of the grants that were available when it was in the budget were helpful. Got some people down here, and they were appreciative of that. So overall, I would say, you can see the summary. People want to be in downtown. They see the opportunity. We have people from outside the area calling, from DC and Baltimore, seeing the opportunities, seeing lower lease rates. I just re-met a person. I was on my way here. He owns Olive's Restaurant in Frederick. His name is Jay. He said, I know you. And I said, Olive's Restaurant. Well, he just bought this building. Tell me the building. On the corner of Washington and Potomac that used to be a diner, or looks like a diner, used to be a drugstore. So he just purchased that building, and he's excited about it. And he's from the Frederick area, and his partner is going to open up a restaurant again downtown. So people are looking to Hagerstown. You see Pretzel Pizza Creations, she came to Hagerstown. Eric at Regenerate, he picked Hagerstown to raise his family and come here to be part of this. So they're excited. There are some opportunities, and we were glad to hear their feedback. And we were also, there was probably 30 other people who want to participate. We just couldn't squeeze them in. So that's kind of the overall report.
Yeah, I mean, I would add that one of the key themes is that, we're competing for these businesses with the county, with other counties, with other cities. So we want to be able to attract and retain the businesses. The more work we do, we want them to stay. We don't want churn. So the themes, I think, around, customer service, I think are really important, because the expectation is ever increasing. A lot of municipalities are becoming more more digital, and people are expecting those things.
Sure.
And so the responsiveness, the ability to feel like that you're being heard, those were themes that we think are solvable in collaboration with the city and city staff. And we did meet with the city staff and got their recommendations on the same focus group data.
And the great news is that costs zero. There's no additional money to do that and
Right.
to pay out.
I'm Taylor Bowen. I'm the other chair of this committee, and I'm going to talk just a little bit about where we go from here, a little bit about our plan. Obviously, the The focus groups were one baby step in a much larger plan. We obviously appreciate the volunteers' hard work and also the stakeholders' ability and willingness to come and share their honest feedback with us. I think that it's very important that we don't end it there, that we listen to what they have to say, digest their accurate and honest statements and what their feelings are, if we disagree, if we agree, and really show them that we're listening and show them an action plan that says we're listening. This last page on your handout talks a little bit about Main Street in general, the 5 groups: clean, safe, and green, public relations, design, organizational, and business relations that we're a part of. Down at the bottom, you can see a little bit of the plan that we have of our work plan coming up, which is improving marketing and public relations. It seemed to me that one of the things that came out of the staff meeting where we addressed this was some of the issues, if they are perceived, the message isn't being got, people aren't getting that message. Crime, for example, I mean, there are statistics that suggest that crime isn't as bad as people make it out to be, but maybe that message isn't quite getting out there. Parking as well. I mean, I've heard several times that other neighboring cities such as Chambersburg and Frederick have less parking than we do. Maybe we need to do a better job of letting people know where parking is. Maybe people just need to understand that this is better than it could be. I don't want to dismiss people's issues, but there is a messaging issue and a branding issue here, and I think that's part of what we want to fix or help with. The Main Street website should be coming online shortly. That's a place that we intend to utilize to get that message and branding out, to try to deliver that. Whatever's happening here, whatever work plan we're working on, that we're delivering that to the stakeholders. Because the one thing when we come up with our plan, we talk about retaining and recruiting. Recruiting is much more difficult than retaining. These people don't need a value proposition. They're already here. We just need to make sure they stay happy and that they feel like their investment is warranted. And another one that's big and one that we're going to be focusing on is the top 3 interactions with city agencies. These top 3 touch points. Where are the top 3 places where businesses, investors, consumers, citizens are most likely to interact with city staff? And how can we address, if there are needs there, how can we address those and make those interactions more positive? Obviously we don't want this to be the end. We do plan to continue to follow up, continue to do more focus groups, and make sure that people see that real things are being done.
2 things, and we'll take questions and comments. Kind of a no wrong door approach. If you pick up the phone, I can't help you. Let me find one of my colleagues who can. Let me help you before you hang up. Let me give you a number. And secondly, this, what I've termed SSP marketing, shameless self-promotion. There are a lot of great things happening in Hagerstown. And to Taylor's point, I think we could help get the message out. And if city staff and public relations can help craft the message, there's a lot of great things happening. And it's usually from people from the outside see it, and the city residents, the county residents, because we're so close to it, don't see it or don't remember it. So to Taylor's point, I think we could help put the message out, and I think we need help crafting a message, all the great things that are happening.
Excellent. Well, I really do appreciate, first of all, I think what is happening with Main Street in general, but particularly with your committee, is very important work. I mean, the fact that we have such valuable stakeholders volunteering their time to gather this kind of feedback is really important, and I think it just shows the kind of leadership and investment that we have already happening here, because it's very well represented in the guests we have with us. And another phrase that I like to use is continuous improvement, and using data to make decisions that drive us towards continuous improvement. So, and I know customer service, customer service department has certain, ways that they can measure those things. And I think it's always good to have that kind of data so that we can focus on continuous improvement to align with our vision and mission. So I really do think it's valuable feedback to have. There was something I wanted to ask you about. You said you had a survey of 2 independent surveys related to real estate investment and renovation. Can you explain more about that?
Sure. So, part of our strategy is to also address the real estate side of it. So if we attract businesses, they need to go somewhere, right? We need to put them somewhere. And so part of the idea was to say, well, what are the barriers to investment in downtown? So what we did was we crafted a survey to go to property owners and investors and also contractors. We were looking at two parts of the issue. One is, are there practical, issues in terms of doing work downtown? I mean, the old buildings and codes and so forth. And then the other side was talking to property owners and saying, tell us about the projects you've done. What types have you done? How big? How many? What were the challenges? What are the barriers? And how do we compare to other places? And so the purpose there was really to sort of uncover anything that we could do to smooth out those barriers and make it more likely people would invest. And also, all of this market research really was our first step in creating a working relationship with these stakeholders so that we could go back and get feedback and work with them to try to improve things.
Great. Don?
I just want to thank you all as well for your efforts. This is really good work. Thank you. This is a really practical approach. And I think the issues that you selected are very relevant issues that much of which can be improved. And this might be a baby step, but it's a big baby step. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, likewise, I want to thank you very much for all your work and effort, and you're hitting it right on the mark. Trouble was, those marks existed 20 years ago, and every council tries to address these perception issues. You hit it on, Paul hit on it excellently. I hear some of the same cliches that I heard 22 years ago said, and not necessarily based on fact anymore, but on perceptions encouraged by various parties. Now, admittedly, it's a chicken and egg thing. If we had more feet on the ground, then I think some of these other negatives would disappear like they are in other urban areas as part of the background. So it's one of these things, if we can get movement that way, I think some of the negatives will fade as a part of the image, but we're not there. So thanks for working on it, and let's see if we can together find a way.
Yeah, I think feet on the street is definitely important. I mean, not only for businesses, but to combat that perception of crime where, it's that power of numbers. One of the reasons why it might feel unsafe or seem unsafe is because it's empty and there's nobody on the streets after a certain point in time. And so it's dark and it's scary. But, when there are events happening and it's late at night and there are, hundreds of people, filling the streets, then it feels less unsafe or more safe. So that is a constant, I guess he called it a chicken and egg conundrum. Now I had a question and it just escaped me. Oh, what do you guys think about, and I don't know if this falls under business relations or if it's design or organizational. It's been suggested numerous times that we have such a large urban core compared to, say, Frederick, that has two main streets and maybe, several blocks along those streets that, this comprise the central business district. But one of the things someone suggested is, to create destination retail types of things. We're never going to get big box retailers in downtown. I doubt that's ever going to happen. But how can we create little niches in the downtown and it's almost happening organically, I guess you could say, with sort of home decor types of things on this corner right out here in front of City Hall, and we have sort of the restaurant row going down Potomac and portions of Washington Street. So is that sort of within your scope, or what do you think about that idea, and how would you be able to do something like that? I'm thinking Main Street will be a good way to do that, but I'm just trying to brainstorm how, or even if that's worthwhile to pursue.
That falls within the purview of business relations, I would think. And one of our primary mandates, in addition to retention, is recruitment. And I think part of that, I guess our theory, our thought process is, if you keep the people that are already here, you're not fighting a losing battle.
Right.
Because again, if everybody's leaving and you're trying to bring people
Right.
in, you're never gonna get ahead. If we keep the people that are here, we help them to be successful, help them to champion for what we're trying to accomplish. It makes it a little easier to get other spaces filled. But part of our focus is on recruitment, and I think one of the challenges is that the demographics have to support that. I mean, in order to convince somebody to come here, we need to be able to show them that there is a path to success. Not everybody's willing to take that risk, and that is one of the major hurdles that we have to overcome, and that's one of the things that we have a committee that's dedicated to that.
Because opening any business is a risk.
It is.
And there's no guarantee, and there's nothing the city can do to absolutely guarantee every business will be successful. But I do think we should try to eliminate as many barriers as possible. I think, I mean, Taylor is, your development at the Patterson was a prime example of a property that would likely never have been rehabilitated if there was not a city grant involved, because, you know, people complain about codes, and I always remind people that many of the codes that our code enforcers have to abide by are state codes. We're not just making extra things up for developers to have to do in order to make these projects happen. But, so taking, you know, your experience with that, and I know that was not without its own challenges, based on the timeline, we were trying to really get that done, and I think without a doubt, it has proven to be successful. But in order to replicate that, I would be interested in any ideas you have to try to knock those barriers down. Going back to the idea of sort of creating those designated sort of areas, I mean, I don't know if that's something you try to work out in the committee and say, okay, well, this is where we think, you know, this type of retail would be more appropriate, or, you know, as opposed to just sort of go wherever you can find the cheapest rent, or, you know what I mean? There's got to be a way to try to create some identity within the downtown of if you need X, then you're going to go to this particular spot downtown. And what's interesting about that is, even though people have different businesses, perhaps in the same type of business, it actually creates more business, even though they're in competition, because it becomes the destination for that particular kind of product or service.
Yeah, I think we have, I mean, we have the beginnings, the seed sort of, you know, we have the arts and entertainment, and I think we could build on that. I think it's important also to note that, you know, often the retail is the last thing to come in a revitalization. And in fact, when we looked at some of the survey data, and we asked, one of the questions we asked was, how dependent are you on foot traffic? Many of the businesses were not. And the reason is that we don't have a lot of foot traffic. And so their business can do okay without, you know, there's this threshold that you need if you're gonna be, you know, an interesting little retail shop. The pop-ups have helped to generate interest in terms of having retail, and I think that's good. I think the more that we can focus that in one area, the more successful those will be, and it'll help to create a little nucleus
More
there.
synergy, right?
Yeah, but our idea is also to bring other businesses as well.
Mayor, I also would like to obviously thank everybody. And as nice as it is for us who live here and are part of city government to want to use the word perception in almost every area, I think it's clear that not all of these are perceptions. And the one that I can specifically point to is when it comes to cleanliness of our streets in the downtown area, we certainly are not Disneyland. And that has been, like others, a constant complaint throughout the years. That, you know, whether it's people emptying their ashtrays from the car out into the street, or the people who smoke outside the buildings who have no idea about ashtrays or want to throw paper or trash, that has been a consistent complaint, and that is something that's solvable. I understand that, like everything else, it takes staff and money, but decisions like that, I think, have got to be made, and I think that is one that city government should and can attack, and I think that ties in to a lot of the other perceptions. When you have a dirty downtown, then it doesn't feel quite so safe, it doesn't feel quite so comfortable, it has the impression that people aren't taking care of things. And I would certainly think that's one we should work on. It's been brought up before, various different methods, whether it's blowing off the sidewalks before the street sweepers come. But I think that is a problem, and it's a problem that can be solved.
And beyond just street sweepers and, you know, public works going out there and doing it, I think too, it's important for people in the neighborhood down here to take some personal responsibility too.
Sure, and you see that,
And
and
the
there
example-
are storekeepers that do.
But the example that I have is the pawnbrokers. I had a chance to talk to them on Saturday night, and she said she was out there sweeping in front of, you know, her shop one day, and a kid who lives in the neighborhood saw her doing that, and he said something to her about, "What are you doing?" And she says, "Well, I'm sweeping up trash." You know, because even though it's not mine, I have pride in my business and my neighborhood here, I'm cleaning up. And the kid got a broom and came out and helped her. So I think we have to change the culture too, you know, whether it's, you know, people throwing their cigarette butts in the street because they think the street's an ashtray, or, you know, just creating events or, you know, trying to instill that community pride so that people change their behavior and will perhaps lead by example and pick up a broom themselves. I know the Chamber of Commerce did a little beautification thing around their building in the alley. So little things like that start to add up, and it shows people, you know, leadership by example. But I agree, where there's problems, but I think this, you know, and when it's been pointed out, I think we've had Public Works has gone out the next day with a street sweeper, or, you know, I see them
And
out there
I
at
guess
six in the morning every day, blowing off Public Square and sweeping up, so there are particular areas that are worse than others.
We'd love to make sure that when we get volunteers like doing this work and giving us these recommendations, that 6-8 months from now, they don't find out that all they did was one of those, oh, we'll spend a lot of time, make a lot of recommendations, and then see nothing come out of it. It's a very frustrating thing. I was long time ago on the Board of Education Citizens Advisory Board, until I realized all it was a feel-good thing to make people feel like they were involved in something, and nothing that they ever recommended ever got taken care of.
Here's what I'd suggest, excuse me, Annabelle, is when you do, because there are things being done. I mean, I see police presence, I see things going on, that they're being proactive, I see street sweeping. As you're doing things, let us know, and we'll spread the word, not only through Main Street, but the chamber will do it to our members and say, here's what's going on, just in our newsletters, because we know it's happening. We have to combat this negative stuff that's probably less than what people think. So let us know when you're doing those things, let us know when there's activities, when it ties in, and we'll share that information. It helps all of us. So, sorry.
It's okay. So I wanted to add also that this focus group summary was beneficial to the other work groups that we have as well, in particular Clean, Safe, and Green, are now planning a street cleanup for Franklin Street at the beginning of October. I think October 7th is the date. So we are already implementing some of the things that came out of this focus group summary to other work groups as well, and hope to continue those and spread the cleanups throughout the city as well.
And I absolutely agree with what Councilmember Metzner said about this is not, Main Street is not just a feel-good thing. We certainly want to get people engaged and get involved, but we want to make progress too. We want to take action. So I do appreciate that.
Thank you. Look forward to working with you.
Okay?
Paul, at the beginning of your comments, you made a statement, and it's extremely true. First impressions are important. When people see dirty streets, they get a bad impression. It's like when you walk into a restaurant and the windows and doors are smeared and dirty. It's not a good impression, and I think Lou followed that up pretty good.
Well, thank you. We look forward to working with you.
Keep up the good work. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Housing Summit update, and I think we can do this in less than 15 minutes.
Good for you.
Good afternoon.
Greetings.
So just to give the mayor and council an update on wrap up from the Housing Summit event. The event was held on July 19th, obviously, at the Bridge of Life Church. It was an effort to bring together local and regional community leaders to have a conversation on improving and enhancing housing and neighborhoods throughout the city of Hagerstown. We think this correlates, obviously, this type of initiative correlates with the mayor and council goals and priorities of neighborhoods and enhancing neighborhoods and having a high quality of life in neighborhoods for all citizens of Hagerstown. We did have over 100 participants attend the event. We had representatives from local government, state government, federal government, developers, realtors, service providers, neighborhood groups, banks, local and regional housing authorities. Those in attendance, they participated in discussions on expanding home ownership, enhancing rentals, creating pathways from housing to homelessness and sustainable supportive housing, fighting blight, energizing neighborhoods. I think out of this event, clearly we can see the importance of housing neighborhoods to all those in attendance. And I think it's safe to say, if it wasn't for the limitations on the venue, we probably would have had much more attendance for the day of the event. With that said, we did receive a lot of feedback during the day of the event, and we also received feedback through surveys after the event. And Sarah's going to touch on that a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the next steps moving forward with Jill after that.
Sure, thank you. So the event was structured into breakout sessions related to specific topics. So we generated over, it was about 2.5, maybe 3 hours of breakouts. So a lot of content got generated during those breakout sessions. And we put together a few of the overall themes that seem to cross breakout sessions. Vision and planning, which I'll come back to at the end, but communication and collaboration. So similar to some of the Main Street discussion that we just had, our housing and neighborhood professionals were looking for precise places that they could access information or connect with each other, or increased marketing around incentives that were available, easier access to things that might help to support their goals. And also, I think one of the huge outcomes of the summit was about 20% of surveyed participants said that they wanted to continue in a leadership role, seeing the action in their particular topics move forward. So we do, as Jonathan mentioned, have a really engaged population around this topic. Other overall themes were quality of life and perception issues, wanting additional amenities in the core to continue to draw and build housing and neighborhood around the core. Workforce and economic development. I think when you talk about housing, you sort of talk about everything. You need money to be able to afford it. You need amenities for people to be able to choose neighborhoods of choice that have that are accessible and that have the things that people want in them. Access to public transportation came up across breakout sessions, and so did the need just to kind of celebrate our successes, as we sort of heard from the business community as well. The overarching theme that we heard from our community was that they were glad to be gathered together for their input, but that there was a desire to see a vision and process move forward. So you'll see, if you look at your overall theme summary, there was a poll of participants that day, and the top priority was split both between collective impact, which would be that kind of a process, and poverty alleviation that day, with participants identifying those as their top priorities.
Can you explain a little more about what
Yeah.
collective impact means?
So collective impact is something very similar to what the Strategic Community Impact Council did, or that On Track is doing with education, or even similar to what the City Center Community Plan does, where it creates a common agenda across partners, where they use shared measurements and all kind of participate in mutually reinforcing activities, and then around continuous communication. So you're deciding on a vision that you're all embracing and then working towards that collectively. And so it relies on stakeholder implementation, and it also takes a significant amount of resources to kind of move a process like that forward.
So some key next steps, as Sarah talked about collective impact, I think there's some key components of that, which is public engagement as well as a role for stakeholders in the implementation. I think a product or an outcome of collective impact is similar to the city center, the community city center plan is a data-driven action plan. So the product of collective impact could be a plan document. And this will take resources to accomplish this. Some next steps would be for us to further define the scale of a collective impact process, because that can vary, but there are some key examples, especially with the SKIP program and the On-Track program and what we did with our own downtown plan. We also need to identify resources, both dollars and people, to carry out the process, and determine a duration for this tied to the resources as well. And I see another key question for us to look into more is defining potential stakeholder capacity and their roles in the next steps. So what expectations could we have of stakeholders in terms of participation and implementation? So that's what I see as some of both key questions that tie to our next steps. And so we'd like to open it up for discussion and feedback.
Yeah, if anyone has any initial reactions to the summary that you are reading, I think this gets to, and you mentioned at the beginning, Catalyst Project number 8, the Housing and Neighborhoods Plan. And I really see this, the results of the interest in the summit, in addition to the fact that people want to have an ongoing role in working on this particular issue, that as we bring the stakeholders back together and assess and review this information, and they're helping us, come up with those next steps. I definitely think we have to identify resources, and in continuing to meet with staff on this issue, we were talking about the idea of pursuing, particularly working with DHCD or any other funding partner to do something similar to what we did with Urban Partners, but really drill down into the housing market. What I'm envisioning is, some actual plans, some action items that we can address through that kind of process, that we can go and start tackling some of these issues. For instance, one of the things that we know is that we have a certain amount of people who own their properties outright because perhaps the property's been in their family for generations. But we also know we have a lot of working poor people, and so it's hard for them to continue to maintain their home, to keep it up to code, essentially, but also basic maintenance. So can we, through that process, identify funding sources or partners to help address some of those kinds of real specific issues in different neighborhoods that ones that we've targeted through the Urban Partners Plan, but also citywide? I think that would be helpful to address. So does anyone have any questions or comments on the event summary?
Well, I only offered this one comment that I offered at our sort of follow-up meeting and attending the forum is, there was clearly a lot of interest in attending. I felt that a majority of attendees, however, tend to gravitate toward their area of interested expertise. And I think I sort of discussed that, when we sat down as sort of a committee in this room and organized sort of, how the event would occur and unfold and who would be involved. You had a sort of fairly broad array of folks discussing it as a subject. And then when we got into this sort of summit and forum format, a lot of the folks in those subject areas sort of, the realtors went and discussed, the realty-related items, and the social service folks who went and discussed the social service items. And so I think, for some of these future endeavors is to sort of get some of those folks out, out of their sort of comfort zone an area of expertise and, you know, have the social service folks that, you know, that want to discuss housing sustainability and rental market and programs, you know, in with the realtor entity and individuals that, you know, that understand, you know, that market, you know, a bit differently. You know, just as sort of you had a lot of folks, you know, interested in this sort of fight blight, you know, may have been interested in sort of, you know, how can the city relax the rules? And so I think getting folks into those different arenas, I think would aid in getting a broader understanding among all the parties that participated.
So kind of get people out of their affinity groups and mix it up a little more.
And I think when you do community, maybe facilitation of a plan, I mean, I think that will be a part of that. You know, just
And I was a little, not to take anything away, but I think I was a little disappointed in my expectation that I would see more folks from our Neighborhoods First groups. What I understand is during the day and most of the folks work and stuff. So if there's a way in the future to identify a time frame and format where they can attend as well, because it was more sort of agency and profession-oriented folks that work within the community getting to it, you know, and not necessarily enough of the folks that live in the neighborhoods that we're talking about. And so I think that would be a benefit in the future if you could say, hey, you know, and a lot of people said, you know, we could have done this over 2 days and not one, but we weren't sure what we were going to get. But if you could have done it in some type of evening format or Saturday format where more folks that live, you know, in city proper can get to it, I think you would have got a bit of a different scope of feedback.
Well, I think being that this was a one-day event, you know, that was certainly, and we really didn't know what the response would be. I think if we're looking at an ongoing project or process, then I think in one respect, it's good to have those affinity groups focused on a specific item and a specific goal. Just like when we went through the Urban Partners process, you know, we reached out to specific stakeholder groups for information, but we also had broader public input as well, so that there was a bit of synthesis. I think that's what we're talking about is, you know, the right hand knowing what the left hand's doing. But I think that's the goal, anyway, of looking at a collective impact process. I think what I hear the staff saying is their concern is that, you know, to have a successful collective impact process, you really need a backbone agency. And what I hear staff saying loud and clear is that they don't have the capacity. They have the capacity professionally, but in terms of workload, that's not something that we can pile on them in addition to their regular duties, which is why I think if we can pursue some funding, and we'll keep working on that, then that might be a very worthwhile endeavor to have, you know, some outside experts come and facilitate that process and really allow us to come up with a quality plan, just like we did with Urban Partners, to address these very specific issues related to housing. Did I capture that okay? I'm not putting words in your mouth, right? But we've met a lot about this, and, you know, our staff do a wonderful job at everything they do, but this was a monumental task to put this one-day event together. So if we're looking at an ongoing process, I just want the council to be aware that we would have to look at obtaining some kind of resources. And we think that we may have a good chance of getting some assistance from DHCD and perhaps other sources of funding. But I do think it's a worthwhile process, this idea of a collective impact specifically focused on housing and addressing these ongoing issues that we've been facing for a while. Any other comments or questions? Okay, stay tuned. We'll keep working on it.
Thank you.
So just actually, before you leave, next steps, we will be going forward with these recommendations in terms of following up with key stakeholders, reviewing the event summary, and gathering more feedback. And then we'll keep exploring the possibility of funding.
Right. I think we need to be outwardly oriented to our stakeholders. We also have to take some time to answer those key questions for the longevity of the project. And
Great.
determine a timeframe in which we can address those kind of fundamental issues of resources.
Sure.
I just wanted to reinforce the value of doing this, having these periodic updates. On the Catalyst projects, we said we wanted staff coming back every quarter, reporting in, giving us a briefing. And I have found that very useful, and I keep thinking this keeps everybody, yeah, you can issue paper reports and stuff, but I think it needs to be part of the public dialogue and part of the record and
Right.
where we think we're getting. And I think the same applies to this housing unit, which is so complex and so complicated, and it's so difficult to turn words into action, you know, all of us, it's so difficult.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is Dot Foods.
Can I run you through some facts on this?
Can't we
Sure.
maybe jump through some hoops or something?
First, I want to recognize Ed Schreiber with Frederick Seibert, and he's the engineer for the project on behalf of Dot Foods, and Mike Spiker, as Utilities Director, is joining me on this as well. Our wastewater policy allows for the extension of service outside the medium-range growth area for a vital economic development project, and that policy's in the packet, and this is exception number 6. The policy requires some support documentation, which we've provided, and that includes support and recommendation from the county commissioners, the county economic development director, and in the packet is a letter from the Economic Development Commission, and then from city staff, both economic development and utilities. And the good news on this project is the expansion of Dot Foods, and that the plan supports the development of a truck maintenance and storage area at the new site, which is the site east of Greencastle Pike and south of Elliott Parkway. There's a map in the packet. With the creation of 95 new jobs and $12.6 million in new investment, with them occupying the new space by May of 17. And that's just the development of the new truck maintenance and storage facility. In addition, as a result of this relocation of that activity from Dot Foods location, this would allow them to develop 140,000 square feet of an expansion to their current facility. Not yet known what the expansion investment numbers are associated with that or the job creation, but additional to the 95 and the 12.6 million. So we do see this as a significant economic development project and happy to recommend it for your review. With your support, this would be on the agenda next week as a resolution.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
I want to get to the bottom line. Without this exception, could this project be done, be completed?
No,
Okay,
That's correct.
that's the bottom line.
that's the bottom line.
Okay.
They would not invest the 13 million into the site without having a public source of water.
Well, speaking for myself, I support it, but I wanted to hear the answer to that
That's
question.
correct.
Councilmember Metzner already indicated his support. How about you, Mr. Brubaker? Alshire's good.
An additional note in the memo is this approval would require a pre-annexation agreement.
Of course.
Although that isn't necessary for this particular exception, correct?
It's not required, but it's been our practice.
Now, this is located in Williamsport, is that right?
So the likelihood of annexation.
Is probably zero, right? Well, I only say that. I mean, do we really want staff and everybody to go through the process of a pre-annexation agreement for a property that has zero chance of being annexed?
Well, gotta be sure it is. I mean, I don't know what, there is one right next to it that has
That's right,
pre-annexation.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm not sure what the link is back. I did see that there was one right next to it that has one.
Yeah, I didn't see the big picture there, but
I mean, maybe we can look at the big picture, but if there is literally zero chance of an annexation, because it's so far away and there's no undeveloped lands in between, I'd hate to see everybody jump through those hoops if there is zero chance of an annexation.
I think it's procedural and recommended. I'd allow Alex to talk more if he would like.
Well, the only reason I brought it up is I saw in your memo that under item number 6 is the only one that is not required.
Yeah, yeah, typically we do require pre-annexation agreements even when there is exception, but yeah, I would agree with Jill, it's practice, and I think it's a good practice to have the pre-annexation agreement anyway, because we never know
Right.
down the road whether we're contiguous, I mean, who knows?
Because even if there's a 1% chance, then we'd be better off
If we
having
don't have
than
it, then
not.
we don't have anything to go on for any future annexation, if assuming if we ever do get out there.
So it's just a matter of course, best practice to include the pre-annexation agreement. Okay. All right.
Okay, can I
Sure.
comment?
Go ahead.
I just want to point out to the public that with the decisions that this body, the mayor and the city council have made, and the efforts of staff, that 2 companies are going to increase employment in this community. Pinnacle Foods and Dot Foods are going to increase employment in this community significantly. Now, it's not normal that in the state of Maryland that small municipalities cause these things to happen. But in this instance, it has happened because of the interest of the mayor and city council, and because our staff, especially Jill and Mike and others, have worked so hard to make it happen. 200 jobs is a lot of jobs, and people are going to be very grateful for those jobs.
Mhm. Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Next item is the rezoning for Burhan's Village.
Good afternoon. This is proposed rezoning for property west side of Burhan's Boulevard North. Case number is ZM 2016-02. What I'm going to do is just give a little background on the property itself, and then we'll get into the rezoning discussion. This property was historically zoned R2, which is now medium-density residential, and it was also that was kind of like the back portion against the Norfolk Southern rail line and Mitchell Avenue. And then the front part that faced Burhan's was zone C2, which is now commercial general. During the height of the housing boom in the mid-2000s, a developer came in with a planned unit development overlay with the intention of developing the site for approximately 80 units of residential. It was kind of a condo regime, townhouse type development.
I'll just interrupt you right there, Alex, and ask you under the proposed zoning, how many units could be put in?
And the proposed zoning for what the applicant is
Yes.
asking for? About the same, 60
That's-
days.
That's what I was
Yep.
curious about. So we already approved a theory of which 60 to 80 units would be able to be there, and now we're basically being asked to do this same
Correct.
thing by way of a different vehicle, essentially.
Correct.
Is that accurate? Okay.
Right.
I understand.
Because when
Totally understand.
because the PUD, that PUD plan never happened. The bottom fell out. It expired. It reverted back to the underlying zoning, which was R2 and C2. And under R2, you could never get that type of density again. And then during the comprehensive rezoning that we as a city undertook in 2010, we just rezoned. The PUD was still overlaid at that time, and as a matter of course, we just rezoned the underlying zoning all to R2. But then the PUD, nothing ever developed there, nothing ever materialized, so then the PUD went away, and then that, of course, means that the entire property reverted to the medium-density residential zoning. Fast forward to today, Burhan's Village LLC, they've filed an application for rezoning on behalf of the property owner for high-density residential, RH, and the property has been since carved up into essentially 4 pieces. There's like a paper right-of-way through there, and then there's about 3 parcels. I don't know that the map that's included in your packet kind of shows that. And what they're proposing, the property, the size is about 6.2 acres. And the plan is, at least for what we understand, would be to possibly market the property for multifamily housing. And to just reiterate on my answer to Councilmember Metzner's question about density, when you compare it to, if a high density, if a multifamily development went on this property, it would have no higher density than what was originally proposed on the Deerfield Knolls plan back in 2005, or excuse me, 2007, 2008. And also, it's interesting.
And what types of development, refresh my memory, were those like quadplexes? Is that what they were planning on doing there?
Yeah.
Townhouses.
Yeah.
Which is why we ended up rezoning it R medium, right?
Right. Well, the PUD was still overlaid on it, and then it was a mapping convention just to make the entire property R2.
Is what they say when they say that, because in their case to say that there was a mistake in zoning it that way, there's insufficient land width and area to adequately meet minimum lot sizes and street widths under the zoning classification. Is that true?
That was of course, that is their argument for
So on how you
mistake.
engineer it, right? I mean,
Right.
how it's
There-
designed or laid out.
What the applicant's engineer conveyed to the planning commission in its public review meeting is that, and then also in things that they've provided staff, is that they feel that the property under RMed would be difficult to develop, given that the lot sizes would have to be so large. It would be hard to develop it as single family or 2-family or townhouse development, and also you'd have to put a street network in there too, and so with all of
Apartments
that,
don't need streets?
it would be private street network. It would not be built.
So it wouldn't have to be
necessarily-
built to city standards?
That's correct.
I see.
So taking all of that into account, that's what their primary arguments for mistake was in this.
I just
for this
don't-
rezoning.
The other part of their argument that I don't know if I buy necessarily is that high-density residential uses would be more appropriate because of the surrounding uses. So if the concern is that, well, there's all this sort of industrial land around there and we need a transitional zone, how does having more density make that better? Or mitigate the fact that there's all that industrial land around it?
That would be a question for the applicant.
Yeah,
I'm
well,
sure
I'm putting
yeah.
it out there only as a question that,
It is-
as I'm reading this and I'm thinking about whether or not there was a mistake made, I think that's one of the legitimate questions.
It is
to be
interesting to
asked.
note that in our staff analysis of the neighborhoods to the west and to the south, on Mitchell Avenue, Fremont Street, Carrollton Avenue, all those houses are on relatively small lots. So when you actually take those lots, and you add them up together and you look at how many dwelling units are in that area, the density is about 18 units per, there's 18 units per acre, something to that effect, which would be consistent with if this were developed as high-density residential, it would be about the same density.
But so the surrounding, what you're talking about, like on Mitchell,
They were-
would that be considered high density or medium density?
Well, it's zoned medium density. A lot of those properties were created prior to
I know, before zoning,
laws.
but would those lots meet the minimum requirements for our med now? No, okay,
No, many of them would not.
right. So that's important to know.
Sure.
For people to know.
As I mentioned, the planning commission held its public review meeting on, and it was on August 31st. And we only heard from the applicant's representation that night. And we kept the record open for 10 days. We didn't receive any public comment either at the meeting or during the 10-day period following, except again from the applicant's engineer. The Planning Commission reviewed this proposal again on September 14th, and the commission determined in its deliberations that there was cause for mistake in the RMED zoning classification. And kind of they take they're not necessarily agreeing with the applicant, but they're saying that they also, that they feel that there is a mistake in the existing zoning classification for RMED based on the following, that the R2 zoning, rezoning that occurred during the comprehensive rezoning was a result of the existing PUD overlay and not an analysis of the appropriateness of the zoning. It was basically done as a mapping convention at the time. Barriers to homeownership at this location were not considered during the 2010 comprehensive rezoning. During that rezoning, it was not contemplated that should the PUD overlay expire, that development of single and two-family dwellings under RMED zoning would not have been economically viable after the removal of development land for infrastructure and setback requirements. Again, going back to this.
Why was the PUD approved in the first place then?
I can't answer that. I wasn't around, that was before my time.
But I mean, at some point, somebody thought it was economically feasible or viable to do something like
Right.
that.
Which then I guess leads into the fourth point, that a PUD like that could not even be approved today since we've changed the regulations on the PUDs.
Well, I think the issue was,
A PUD like that, because a PUD would have to include other
some
types
commercial,
of uses.
right, and that's-
Commercial.
So a PUD could still go in and put commercial on the frontage on Burhan's and do residential to the rear.
Conceivably. Oh, that's true, yes, it couldn't,
So you could put two single families on Mitchell, commercial on the front, and the rest of the units in the interior townhouses. And part of the PUD, I believe at that time, was for the ability to get a public street from Burhan's to Mitchell, right? I think the street went through, and that was to assist or improve traffic conditions so that you avoided having to go through the single lane. I lived on Mitchell for about 10 years.
okay.
So you could avoid going.
The horn honking tunnel.
Yeah, the tunnel
Yeah.
that you beep going through every time. I mean, this PUD wasn't considered just because it was a PUD or in some type of vacuum. I mean, we spent more time than I thought was applicable or appropriate on a pretty small piece of land that was pretty simple. You got a bunch of single-family homes in a neighborhood that struggles to maintain stable home ownership, you know, within that neighborhood, and you didn't want to cram a bunch of high-density apartment development into an area that you're already struggling to secure some modicum of owner occupancy in. And at the same time improve traffic conditions, and not overwhelm what is a pretty poor line of sight, entrance and exit onto Burhan's. I mean, that's right before the bridge, right across from the cement place. You know, it is in a place where you'd say, you know what, instead of 60 units, we should have, a bunch of units. So I just think that a lot more went into that Deerfields Knowles thought process than what its base density was.
It's supposed to be home ownership also.
I mean, that was part of the reason we went with the PUD, is because it created,
Sold as home ownership.
you were able to sort of map out the type of development instead of just how many units of the development.
This certainly isn't the answer to how we develop more home ownership in Hagerstown, is it?
No.
would,
Or high-quality, high-density
would a
housing.
public road connecting Burhan's and Mitchell still be on the table as part of a site plan for this property? as it
I sup-
develops?
I suppose it could be. It couldn't be a condition of the rezoning, since this is a piecemeal rezoning.
Yeah, but the applicants, one of the points of the applicant's argument you just cited was that attempting to develop it with a public street system is not economically feasible. Right?
That's why I
And that was
say
point
con- that's
two
why
or
I say
three
conceivably
of
it's
the
possible.
applicant's argument.
Right.
So we could lose that connection altogether, just like we did the one from Eastern to the backside of Pangbourne.
Or it'll be private, and because I understand it would still connect to both streets, would it not? It would have
We would-
egress and
We would
egress and.
expect it to connect to both Mitchell and Burham.
Right, so then you'll end up with a situation like on the dual highway with those apartment complexes
Where
that
you
you
go
can
through
drive
the-
through as a cut-through, but it won't be a public right-of-way or public road.
Well, only if the parking lots connect the whole way through
Right.
to Mitchell, you know.
Right.
And by the way, the exit, on Mitchell is just about as bad, because it's right before you go down the hill to the
Right.
The one-lane
one
tunnel.
lane
Right.
beeping the horn thing.
I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
Oh, that's okay.
I ask the questions as they pop up in my head. Go, continue, please.
And I guess I was just gonna finish up with just saying well, first with the planning commission, they believe that that RH zoning would be appropriate, because the 2008 comprehensive plan anticipated residential in this area, and commercial and industrial do not work given the site configuration and setback requirements, which I think maybe a lead into, if I could address it at this point, the email we received on, from today, I believe, on, I think it was a citizen asked if this property could be what's the possibility of this property being zoned for industrial? And when you apply the setbacks for an industrial, you're left with almost no envelope.
I would agree, but the argument that individual made, I think, had some validity in the fact that since 2008, we know a lot more about the we'll call it the environmental characteristics of the surrounding than we did then. And just as we wouldn't be set tomorrow to have that type of level of residential development on some of the adjoining properties that have environmental concerns, I wouldn't be set to say this is where we should put a whole bunch more people. I mean, you have, you have water systems that are being monitored and properties that are being monitored directly adjacent that have experienced decades of significant economic or environmental impact, negative environmental impact.
Grinder pumps all over again.
Yeah, and I just,
Way.
I'd be hard pressed to even say that's where a bunch of residential development should go, period.
Understood. Yeah, I just throw that out as just to kind of respond to that email, and just to, when you factor in just bulk requirements such as setbacks and any other things they have to do, forest conservation, landscaping. And I would add that to, whatever development were to go on this site, even if it were zoned RH, theoretically, a multifamily development would have to, it would have to meet our multifamily standards, land management code. You would have landscaping requirements, forest conservation.
Amenities.
It'd be amenities plan. So it wouldn't be like some other complexes in this town. It would be, we've really shored that up in years past in the land management code.
You're trying to say it will be a more high-quality, high-density residential neighborhood than some have been previously built in this area.
At least in the design side.
I mean, I'm not completely against this rezoning, but I think it's a pretty high bar to say that there was a mistake. I mean, I think everyone knows, I mean, the neighborhood, the characteristics of the neighborhood have not changed probably in the last 50 years.
Which is why they didn't make the change in the character argument.
Right.
They're trying to do the mistake.
But it would not be, the commercial and industrial, you said, would face setback difficulties, et cetera, et cetera. Of
Yes.
course, there's topo issue.
Right.
topographical issues on this site as well, especially towards the back of it, as I recall.
Right.
Along the railroad tracks. However, the commercial depth is about the same as the existing, if you did commercial, the depth is about the same as the other properties up and down Burhan's, to the lower side. Getting to Kristen's point, for a mixed-use PUD, if commercial works in front, now, I don't think you could get that public street in the whole way over to Mitchell. I'm not even sure that's a good idea myself. But you could put commercial there and get whatever housing could be made to work by extending the existing street network into the back of the property behind the commercial and do a PUD based on the existing zoning.
Right.
So I don't think that's infeasible either, personally. You know, I don't think there's an overwhelming argument for mistake myself. You can construct one, but I don't think it's an overwhelming one.
So I think we hear the public hearing.
But we have a public hearing, this is just preliminary.
Yeah,
We'll see what's said.
Public hearing will be next Tuesday.
Do we notify folks?
Yes.
Like directly who surround the property? And then, of course, we have all kinds of
We
public
have
advertisement
adjacent
requirements.
It's adjacent property owners, which we have certified, we send certified letters. And the property the sign has been posted in 4 different places. And in fact, I did get a call, not for this public hearing, but for the planning commission's public hearing asking about the rezoning. So folks in the neighborhood are seeing it.
But nobody appeared. except
No, nobody
the
appeared. The
applicant
only
at
call
the-
that I got-
at the HPC hearing.
Right, the only call that I received, it was a resident, and she had some concerns, said she was coming to hearing, but never did.
Is the railroad considered one of the property owners you notify?
Yes.
They said they'd run extra trains.
Mayor, I'd just like to make this comment. Sure. I see absolutely no value in this rezoning whatsoever. As of right now, I would vote against it, and vote vigorously against it. I am willing to wait for a public hearing to see if there are any ideas that come out of the public hearing. But quite frankly, what I see in this rezoning is increased significant problems for the people of the west end of Hagerstown as a consequence of doing this zoning. There are a number of apartment complexes in this town that that operate with the help of, thank God, the police department. And I think the same kind of problems coming out, the same kind of problems that have to be resolved on a daily basis by the police department, Jerry Kendall, we all know the good work that he does, will certainly come out of this project. I just see no value in it at all. It gives me a lot of heartburn, and if this were an up and down vote tonight, I'd be voting against it.
Well, quite frankly, I tend to lean that way only because I don't think it's a mistake to try to have home ownership as a goal. And I don't think there's anything about this particular neighborhood that deters home ownership when you have, I'm sure people on Mitchell Avenue own their homes. People on South Prospect own those homes and knew that all those industrial uses were there when they bought them. So, you know, I'm not so sure I necessarily buy this argument that because you have this industrial land surrounding it, no one's ever gonna wanna buy a house there. And can you explain, it's part of, on the 4th page of the attorney letter for the applicant, the applicant's proposed development of the site using tax credit finance development would greatly assist the city's meeting the comprehensive plan goal of quality, affordable workforce housing, which, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean renting, right?
Right.
But so can you explain the tax credit finance development and why that's important in this? Okay.
I think that should.
Well, that's
Throw
putting
that
it out
for the
there.
public hearing, I would
I'm
do
putting
that.
it out there because I think
I
it's
don't think
important
it's-
for people to
yeah.
understand what that means,
Yeah.
you know? That we're not looking, we're not just looking to create any old high-density apartment complex.
What's the quid pro for the tax credits?
Right. So I think, you know,
Right, I can't really answer that question. I think that probably best left to the
it
applicant.
was a rhetorical question.
Okay.
But it does deserve clarification because, I mean, I think this, you know, to argue that, that it was a mistake to think that increasing home ownership in this particular neighborhood especially is a mistake. I have a hard time buying that argument.
But just keep in mind, we gotta make sure that if we decide not to do it, that there is a reasonable alternative. That's why I was trying to lay the grounds, that there are other alternatives available.
Yes.
You can't make it not usable, so we just gotta be careful.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't read anything that says it's impossible to build
Something on
medium-density residential in this
Well, something,
tract.
anything.
Right.
So, okay. Thank you, Alex.
Thank
Any
you.
other
Thank you.
Questions for Alex?
We'll see you next
We
week.
look forward to the public hearing. All right, vacant structures program proposed amendments. Kathy's been anxiously awaiting to get here to the
I
table.
was going to talk about vacant subjects.
Well, we're back to follow up on the presentation we made on June 14th about our experience working with the program. We discussed some possible amendments to the program to provide, maximize our impact on the health of our neighborhoods and the commercial districts, and then provide some further flexibility for recently renovated properties and for non-blighted properties listed and marketed for sale. So we're trying to, with these amendments, to make some improvements based on our experience working with the program, and then also based on input we received from the public who have non-blighted properties that they are either trying to sell or they're, you know, fixing up and they'd like some relief from the vacant structures program. So, you know, as we presented in June, we were experiencing some success with the program, but there remain some issues of concern that we wanted to address, and that's what we're back here with this evening. And there was another, before Paul goes over the amendments that we proposed, that we actually discussed last time, but we're providing more detail. A new issue arose since the June 14th issue. We received an email from a developer who recently acquired a blighted property and wishes that he would not be subject to the vacant structure program. And so PCAD staff met to figure out, well, is there an exemption that we could recommend that we would feel comfortable with for these situations? We really couldn't recommend one because usually this is gonna involve a blighted property. And we're a little concerned about hanging out there waiting for a development plan to come forward with a blighted property. That could be causing problems for the neighborhood or could be dangerous for first responders. Then we kicked around, well, what about if we refunded, if they licensed it and then we refunded if they came in for a permit within 6 months? It's a possibility, but since this has not been presented to the mayor and council before, we figured before making any kind of recommendations, we just see if the council wanted to do anything in terms of an exemption or a refund for those circumstances, when it's an arm's length transaction, because we don't want to create another loophole for people to work the system where they just take it from one LLC and shift it to the other.
No, I think I agree. I'm
Do
just
you,
trying to
do
figure.
you want to discuss that first?
If you like.
Okay, let's do it.
I
I frankly think they
To figure
belong
out
in the
something.
vacant, I personally feel like they belong in the vacant structures program, period. However, I am willing to concede somebody's idea of a refund.
Right.
I like
I
that
think
idea.
that's,
I am too.
As an incentive to
that's all.
get it.
Yeah.
I just think there's not gonna be that many
Right.
of that
They get it
scope. You're
done,
not gonna be able to
then, yeah,
say,
give the money
these are
back.
the ones and these
Right.
aren't.
I totally agree.
That's a good incentive to
Yeah.
get stuff
That's
done.
And for many of these properties, they're probably already in the vacant structures program, and that lasts
That
for a
would be no
year.
exception.
Yeah, but with this one, we were having trouble gaining compliance to come into the program, and then the property changed hands.
Okay, so that's all.
Okay.
Well, just to go over briefly on some of the recommended changes, these are all the things that we had mentioned in June, is just putting them actually in the context of the code. We wanted a clear definition of what active work is, so we came up with a definition for active work, basically requiring 2 systems to be involved with some renovation, not just someone replacing a water heater or putting an electric baseboard heat or an outlet for a microwave. These are different things that people have gotten exemptions for, so it's actually clarifying it so it's more defined. Also given more clarifications, once we got feedback from the community on different type of exemptions that we should see in the program, such as if someone's taking some of those success stories that we had mentioned to you in the June presentation of totally renovating the property, bringing it back online as a very viable property in our neighborhoods, giving them a 6-month exemption if they remain vacant during that time period after a full renovation has occurred. Also, given the exemption of if the property is being marketed through a Maryland licensed real estate agent, giving them a year time period rather than the 6 months, giving them an opportunity to sell
non-blighted.
if it's non-blighted.
Does it matter whether they own it or not?
Whether who owns it?
If they're marketing their own property?
You mean like for sale by owner?
Mm-hmm.
We felt it would be more important and more of a demonstration of a serious attempt to sell if they were working with a real estate agent.
So, but if it's for sale by owner, can't they still list it in some system? Or what if it's an individual that owns a number of properties but is also a realtor? Let's say they own 20 rentals. And they're also a licensed realtor and they just list it as, you know, they're selling one of their
It
properties.
seems like at that point that they would be the licensed realtor that we're saying would need to be involved. It's very hard for us to prove someone's really marketing it if they just say, I
Yeah.
got it for sale.
I'm just using those two examples as examples of, you know,
We just figure it's a little harder to
Trying.
game the system if it's going through a real estate agent. Because, believe you me, people game the system. This is why we're back with some of these changes.
Well, I'm wondering if the workaround is, you know, a licensed real estate agent who isn't also the owner of the property. I mean, I don't know if that's addresses Mr. Alshire's concern, but
Well, I think that if
I
they're
don't know how
a
long
real
that-
estate agent, they are.
you would
listing it to-
hopefully, they're
By
actively marketing
By
it.
definition, they're listing it to a licensed real estate
Right.
agent.
One would
As
hope.
long as that licensed real estate agency is listing it, right? Does it say list? Or it just says?
Licensed.
actively being marketed for sale with a license.
Actively being marketed for sale.
You might have to define that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What does that mean?
That could be open to interpretation.
If it's listed on their site, is it, if it's,
Well, there's multiple listings, there's other listings, there's, frequent advertising. But if it's just on some guy's list, if somebody calls in, oh, I have these properties for sale, I'm not sure that's quite the intent here. You know what I mean? If it's-
Or if you're using MLS, are you discriminating, you know what I mean, against what you intend that definition to mean?
I guess you could
I
all,
just, listen, what we're talking about, if I just want to make sure we all understand what we're discussing. We're discussing the very rare instance in which a realtor who is the owner would be listing a property.
I'm saying, you haven't, it doesn't say in here, who's listing.
But it says it has to be actively.
But I mean how it's listed,
But does that make any difference if if it says it has to be being actively sold to a real estate agent?
Yeah, I don't
Doesn't that sort of cover everything? If there's a real estate agent involved, a licensed real estate agent who has been signed up to sell a property, it sounds like to me that they're actively involved in trying to sell it. Maybe I'm wrong.
Okay. But I just have to wait and figure that out. I mean, see
yeah.
if something.
and it's
Yeah.
one, it's one
Yeah.
year. The exemption's only 1 year, it's not.
yeah, I mean, I think the goal of the changes is appropriate. I
I
think
mean,
that,
I don't know
you
how many real estate agents are gonna go out and say, you can tell them you've listed it with me, and you can list it with me, and I won't try to sell it at all, because you can game the
Right.
system. That's the
Right.
exception that we're worried about.
One would hope not,
And
right.
I would think.
I was worried about the
that
converse of
if-
that too. If somebody's really trying hard for sale by owner, I feel like we're almost penalizing them, you know what I mean? When they're actively trying to sell it just as well.
The one experience we had with that, where we were getting a complaint from a property owner, is it appeared the effort to sell was a piece of paper in the window. Not too sure if
Yeah, I
anything
don't
more
know.
proactive than that
That's
happened.
the problem. That's the problem.
All right.
And that's it.
And
I
they can
understand
argue
that.
to a judge, that's active.
No, I totally
It's
understand that
not.
that's the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good with three?
You have to bring it back if it gets
Yeah.
gamey.
Yeah, I'm good with Steph's suggestion.
And then the re-inspection fee system?
The last one is just to address, the inspector gets called many times, most of these times are by the banking industry that has received a notice and has called us and said, we corrected the work, and then we go out there, no work has been corrected. So it's given an avenue for them to be able to charge for that inspection so that we can actually.
Does that happen frequently?
Oh, yeah, feel your pain.
Very, very
Is that
often.
due
All
to
the
some
time.
kind of miscommunication amongst the owner and the contractors, or how does that work?
I'm not 100% sure, but I would say that the contractor reports back to the property preservation company, we did the work, and then they contact us and we go out and realize no work has been done.
Or someone's overly optimistic on when they think they'll be done with the
Right.
work, and they call for inspection, anticipating they'll be done, and it doesn't happen.
I see.
That's a generous interpretation.
So that they don't lose the job. In other words, they're telling the people it's already done, but they got it scheduled 2 weeks from when they said it's
Got
already
it.
done. Because they're not coming to check,
That never
the banking
happens, Chris.
entity. Yeah, right.
Never happens.
And we already have a re-inspection fee process for building permits, this just extends it into the vacant structure program.
Okay, and we already
Sounds good to me.
discussed the last part, so
I like,
are these also on for next week's regular session, is that
We
right?
can make them, yeah, with the fifth one being the new arm's length sale situation.
Oh, did I miss that discussion? I'm sorry. So we're gonna move forward with
Yes.
that? Okay.
Everybody was good with that, with the sort of
Arm's
a
length.
refund system, is that right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
yeah, we agree with that.
License, they'll be refunded if they come back within 6 months for a permit.
All right.
Before you
Thanks.
go, I would like some update offline of the property on East Franklin. That appears it would fall within this ordinance.
Oh, okay.
And has, but also appears to be under some form of work. Yeah.
Okay. Red light camera update.
They got the permits.
Greetings.
Good afternoon.
Welcome back.
Well, good evening.
Yeah. We still may have a chance of completing this
Son,
meeting
it's not over
by
the yard mark.
6:15.
No,
Not quite.
not yet. We wanted to update you regarding our red light camera project. When we last met, I believe it was in June, we had the Howard County representative from the automated program here. We've looked at all the avenues for us, and we believe the best course of action for us to proceed with our red light camera project would be to enter into an MOU with the Howard County Automated Enforcement Program. It's the best avenue for us for fiscally, for the administration of the program. It's well respected throughout the state. I believe it's over 11 municipalities that they manage, and some large municipalities, so it's a good program for us. We certainly couldn't do it without additional staffing. It wouldn't be cost effective for us. And what we would suggest is that we want to present the MOU to you for approval, and that way we can launch our program. Okay.
And that would be forthcoming probably sometime in October.
Yes.
So if possibility, we may ask for a special session if we would like that. If not, it would be October's regular meeting.
Do you have a ballpark idea of how much a contract with them will cost? Or what kind of revenue sharing, or how does that work?
We can give you some real generic numbers, but it's, with Howard County, there's a fee per camera for handling and processing, and then through the vendor, there's also an equipment rental fee associated per camera.
Gotcha. Okay, thanks.
And the resolutions of, and the MOU would have the specific.
Right.
To clarify, there'll be two MOUs. I know Jason's back there too. There'll be a MOU with Howard County as well as an MOU with ATS, right?
That's correct.
The
American
camera
Traffic
vendor.
Services, okay.
Great.
Great.
Thanks.
And then lastly.
Breckford.
Breckford.
Oh, that was
Breckford manages our speed camera program. It's up for renewal, it automatically renews. We would like it to automatically renew, and then next year, we look at putting out an RFP for some competition regarding it. I believe, looking at Breckford and what they've done for us thus far, it's pretty much been flawless for us. They administer our program very well. So we're happy with what they've done for us.
I'm fine with that.
Great. Thanks. I'm just looking at the chart here, safe speed revenue. We have a lot of people who don't pay their citations, is that right?
And I just wanted to take the opportunity, hello.
Hi.
To piggyback on both of these fine gentlemen here. I think it had been probably, I know, about 18 months since we've last been here to provide just like a review or an update. This document should have been very similar to what we last brought forth. And I just want to remind everybody, so I have a few years of actual history here, along with our fiscal year 17 approved budget. The numbers and everything that's at the top, down to the line that says net safe speed program revenue. I just want to remind everybody, our HPD division has multiple departments and areas. This area that I'm showing down to this line is specifically everything that we've segregated, like individual staff time, legal fees, all the other contract expenses that we pay to that specific area. Anything above and beyond that individual department goes towards helping pay for other public safety costs. So in fiscal year 16, HPD total division had operating expenses of like 13.2 million. And then in the fiscal year 17 budget, it's 13.6. So while we can see in fiscal year 16, the program's doing exactly what we had hoped or intended it to do. We started out in April of 2012 with a handful of cameras for 3 months. Slowly worked our way up to 11, and we sort of saw a spike in fiscal year 13 and fiscal year 15, and in 16, as people's behaviors are starting to change, we're seeing a slight decline in the revenue. And again, that's not to be, it's not unexpected, it's anticipated, it's what, it's proving that the program is doing what we're hoping it will do, and that's change behaviors. One of the two things that we added on here that I'm not sure I provided last time is total amount of cash collected, because I think one or two council members posed that question to see how much annually we are receiving. This report shows how much citations we have in revenue, but it doesn't tell us how much we had collected, so we included that this time. So in fiscal year 16, with the citation revenue, we're just shy of 1.5 million. Some of the citations we anticipate we're not going to collect on, and basically we assume once you get greater than 120 days, the likelihood of collecting starts to get less and less. So we go ahead and build that in and estimate that we're not going to collect that. That brings us down to 1.2 million. And then we pay Breckford just shy of $500,000. All other expenses in that department division to run it is $145,000. So a total of $641,000. And that leaves just $580,000. That $580,000 helped us pay and continue to cover several of our HPD hiring incentives. We have monthly housing allowances, which are $100 a month, and then as well as one-time sign-on bonuses that are $5,000. So some of our $580,000 went towards that. We also have several grants. The COPS hiring grants, the two first one was in 2012, one was in 2013. It's a total of 7 positions. Our general fund match on those positions when we came and asked for approval was this funding source. So we're showing $171,000 was our general fund coverage for that. And then other things like tasers, body armor. In fiscal year 17 budget, it will include body-worn cameras if there's enough to go around. And then also 3 fire captain positions within HFD.
I assume that the unpaid citations, are we ready for questions?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, are you gonna ask if that's cumulative or year
Yeah, I was
over
gonna
year?
ask, that was my first question.
I was gonna say.
It had to be cumulative, but I
It's
wanted to make
cumulative.
sure.
Okay, that makes
It's
a
out
lot
there
more sense now.
anywhere, if somehow it gets out there, that bottom line
Right.
is cumulative, and you need to make a note of that. so-
Right.
Okay.
'cause some people don't read charts, they read them very literally.
That's okay. And so-
Um,
and
But,
so one
but my
quick-
second question relates to that, though.
Yes.
Several times that's been an issue, as each chief comes in and talks about this, and mostly it's out of state, as I understand. But do we, have we had any more cooperation in getting or found ways to deal with those out-of-state citations?
And before Chief is put on the spot to answer that question, I do, so one of the things I want to remind everybody is that what we did after fiscal year 15, when our outstanding citations was $1 million, we said, we have to do a better way. I think Councilmember Munson was one of the first ones who was like, no. So we worked internally, we came back and we have a collection agreement with Breckford. So now, in addition to all the other services, they are also doing that. They didn't get that up and running until March, so we have not had a full year of that. When I
collection of-
looked, they average anywhere from about 7,000. I think our highest month was 15,000 in collections per month since March on all of our older items.
Which
So just to
Dollars
kind
or
of,
number of
$7,000,
citations?
$7,000, and
That's all?
yes,
And that includes out-of-state.
that includes
That's a
everything.
drop in the bucket compared to the amount.
But it's a start. It's more than we've had in the past.
Okay, do we, if you're a resident of Maryland, does the state withhold your registration? Are we up
Yes.
to paying that?
We
Okay,
already
double
do that.
Yes.
check that.
And I believe the state also charges a fee for that.
Yes, they do that. It's the out-of-state, it's out-of-state, is. We don't have that reciprocity with them, so that's the difficulty for us. We live so close to West Virginia,
Right.
Pennsylvania, and Virginia.
Great. Any questions? Yeah, Don?
This is slightly off the subject, but related. I know that it's the state who makes decisions about where cameras are located. Have they made a decision with regard to the Hager School?
They have not.
They have not.
They have not. That's a very difficult location with the circle there. That's gonna be a challenge for us. So they have not, though.
Okay.
Any other questions or feedback?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the great work. Brings us to
Yeah.
city administrator comments.
Nothing additional, thank you.
I did want to make a note that Councilmember Nye obviously is not here tonight, and we want to wish her husband all the best as he recovers from a stroke that he had I think it was last Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning. She's been traveling back and forth between Hagerstown and Pittsburgh as her husband is hopefully close to being brought home, but we send her our thoughts and prayers and hope that others will do the same as he begins the journey of recovery. And I'll pass it on to Councilmember Lumetz. Mr. Brubaker?
No comments this evening.
Mr. Alshire?
Just also echo your comments.
Mr. Munson?
Yeah, Mayor, a couple of comments. First, on Sunday's, in Sunday's newspaper, there was a great article. It was entitled, "Broadband Upgrade Puts Hagerstown Among Gigabit Cities." And starting on Monday, Hagerstown has this new status. And as a consequence, it is likely that a lot of good things will happen to us. I want to quote a paragraph from that article and then make a point. Status as a gigabyte city sets Hagerstown apart as one of the select number of communities across the country to have that level of broadband connectivity, enabling the city to attract high-tech, high-paying jobs in fields such as engineering, new technologies, and call centers. Now, having made this point, I would point out that the article was a great article. It was well-written, it was well-researched, but it was deficient in one respect, and I think it's important to point it out. This mayor and council has been working on getting significant broadband for a long time, and our point person on that has been Scott Nicewarner, Director of Information Technology and Support Services for the city. Scott put his heart and soul into this. He practically created this opportunity from scratch, and he was the only one that didn't get a mention in the newspaper. And he, more than anybody else, made this possible. And after I read the article a couple of times, I realized that Scott hadn't been mentioned, and he and his staff do such a great job in information technology for the citizens of the city of Hagerstown. I just felt compelled to mention the good work, the dedicated work that he did on behalf of getting this broadband to Hagerstown, which is quite likely to help us really change downtown Hagerstown.
I agree with you on that point, and share in your congratulations to him. It really is a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff, but he has worked very closely with Antietam Cable as they've come up with their plans, and certainly we are prepared to continue to partner with them as they market it, and we can spread the word about this awesome opportunity. Did you have anything else?
That's it.
I did want to mention a couple things. First of all, I want to thank everyone who organized and participated in the Remembrance in the Park that we attended after our meeting last week. It was very well done, as usual, and just so important to continue to remember that awful tragedy and what we can do to be more prepared. Also, I wanted to mention and congratulate staff and all the volunteers for the absolutely fantastic Fall Fest from this past Saturday at City Park. It was a beautiful day. It was very well attended. I think many Pokemon were caught throughout the day. In addition to, when I went, it was early afternoon, and they had already had almost 700 people through the Museum of Fine Arts. It was just very well done. So I want to congratulate staff and all the folks who had a hand in that, in putting that together. And just wanted to remind folks that next Tuesday, the Fireball Run is coming to town. And in case you don't know, that's a streaming program on Amazon Prime that has a global audience of more than 4 million people. So as Dan Spedden at the CVB said, you just can't buy that kind of good press and advertisement for the city of Hagerstown. We have contestants who are celebrities, millionaire, billionaire business executives, community leaders, and 2 teams happen to be from Allegheny County this season. But we want to invite everyone out to Public Square next Tuesday. The square will be closed to traffic from 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. There is information out there to the public, but basically the street on South Potomac will be closed just after where the parking deck is, so you'll still be able to access the parking deck, and would encourage folks to park there. Central Lot will still be accessible, but it will be closed from Jonathan Street all the way through to basically Renaissance Way, and down through the unit block of South Potomac Street. So just be aware that the square will be closed at 9:30 starting next Tuesday, but the big rally on the square, which we would invite the whole community to come out and basically welcome these teams of contestants for this global audience to really just show what Hagerstown's got and welcome these folks. So looking forward to that. And if there's no other comments, then we will be adjourned. Thanks.